DFS community. Welcome to the Week 14 edition of one of the most accurate DFS shows in the industry. This is episode number 74 of the Adjusted Line Play Report, where we take a deep dive into the play in the trenches to determine game script and player outcomes. The show is presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I am your host, Todd Hoffman. You can find myself over on Twitter at Todzilla1337. You can also find Zilla Fantasy Elite over on Twitter at Zilla Fantasy. All right, folks, as the intro said, we take a deep dive into the play in the trenches. We're always told that the game is won and lost in the trenches, so why does no show take a peek at the play in the trenches? Well, that's exactly what we do here. We give you that information so you can say, hey, if this game is won and lost in the trenches, here's what the trench lineup looks like. And based off of that, you can pretty much predict pretty well how games are going to go, which players may perform well. Thursday Night Football happened last night. Said, hey, Green Bay should have lots of time to throw. It's probably going to be good for Christian Watson. Lo and behold, we see him with 113 receiving yards last night, and yeah, pretty good outcome there. So let's dive into it. We're just going to hop into the main slate here. We got 6 teams on bye here, so a smaller slate. We will include the Sunday night within this main slate because FanDuel is doing that this year. So. Number 1 game on the slate, we have Buffalo heading into Los Angeles to face the Rams. This is a 49.5 Vegas game total, so that's pretty healthy there. Again, number 1 on the slate. With that Vegas line, that gives Buffalo a 26.5 team implied total and the Rams a 23 team implied total. Good for 2nd and 10th on the slate. I believe that's out of 22 teams total. Getting into the Buffalo side, they're number 1 and number 2 in those pass categories. Number 1 in pass protection, the Rams 21st in defensive pass rush, so they're not getting sacks. The problem is they're generating a lot of pressure. I think everybody's kind of realized that those 4 defensive linemen that they have, they're all first-year or second-year players in the NFL, are doing very well. So they do generate a lot of pressure despite not having a very good adjusted sack rate here. But Buffalo is pretty good in that pass protection. Based on this, on paper, this is basically looking like Buffalo should have plenty of time to throw, or at least not take any sacks in this particular matchup. And then the DVOA, that's kind of getting rid of or away from the adjusted sack rate. Number 2 for Buffalo, number 22 for the Rams. 20 gap there, plus 20 gap there for Buffalo's offense. They should have time to throw based off of this, despite what I had said earlier. The Rams, they do generate some pressure, I believe, but despite that, their pass DVOA has been atrocious. So 22, that's almost in the red category, and Buffalo's the top 2. So Buffalo should be plenty good in the pass game. Obviously, Josh Allen is the quarterback in that scenario. It's just a little difficult to figure out which pass catcher you want to throw it to. You got Amari Cooper, you have the rookie Keon Coleman, you have Dalton Kincaid possibly coming back, you have Dalvin Cook who receives it out of the backfield, and then you have Khalil Shakir, who's probably the best option in there. All vying for targets. Curtis Samuel's in there as well, and we've seen him kind of take a bump up here recently. There's just a lot of people, which probably makes them not as popular in a tournament. But again, where's the upside coming from? I'm not sure. But the pass game should be very effective here for Buffalo. And then the run game, perhaps even better here. Run blocking here for Buffalo, number 2 versus the Rams, 24th, and stopping it. And then the run DVOA number 4 versus number 21. This is actually the worst of the 4 matchups here on offense for Buffalo, number 4 versus 21. So what this is telling me, the run game should also be very effective. The pass game should have time. The pass game should be explosive. The run game also should be very effective and probably very explosive. This is going to be good for all of those Buffalo running backs, especially not Dalvin Cook, but his brother James Cook. So Buffalo offense here indoors in the Rams Stadium. It is away, but I think Buffalo should play very well in this on offense. Pretty much feel pretty comfortable with starting those guys. Even a person like Ray Davis we saw be pretty successful in that weird game last week in the snow. We could see him with some additional work here, especially if Buffalo's putting up a lot of points and the Rams can't answer. We might see Ray Davis get a little bit more involved there too. Now on the Rams side, number 18 versus 17th on the pass rush. That's kind of even there. Standard day at the office in terms of time to throw the ball there for Stafford. And the pass DVOA, very even as well. Buffalo 9, the Rams number 11. So those scenarios, I say studs eat. And I think the Rams have some studs over there. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, I believe, are both still very good wide receivers here in the NFL. So this is a scenario where they both will probably be able to overcome this defensive matchup where it's otherwise pretty evenly matched in terms of, you know, that pass DVOA, offense versus defense. I think this is a situation where the Rams studs can eat in a matchup like this, and maybe one where you avoid a little bit more of the tight end or those tertiary pieces like Robinson and whatnot in this matchup. Now getting into the run side, it's very similar, even matchup. Rams number 7 in run blocking, Buffalo though number 8 in stopping the run. Very even, studs eat kind of scenario. And then we have the Rams number 12 in the run DVOA on offense, Buffalo number 7. That's slightly in the favor there of Buffalo's defense. Of the matchups, that is the worst for the Rams on offense. But yeah, it's kind of one of those studs eat kind of games in general for the Rams. We've seen Kyren Williams be very good. So I think it's one of those scenarios where the Rams probably okay moving the ball. We should see that happen with Kupp and Puka Nacua. The run game should be okay, but not great. I do have a feeling that a lot of their drives will be successful. They'll, grind down the field, and then those might grind to a halt at some point where, hey, run game just got stopped a little bit. We didn't convert on a pass play. We only gained 6 yards. We're expecting to get 8 or something like that. And then they end up kicking some field goals. I think this is a spot for the Rams that may end up kicking field goals. But yeah, driving down the field, I think they're going to have opportunities to score touchdowns. They're going to have opportunities to score field goals. Obviously, Buffalo looks like they're going to be scoring a lot of points. This 49.5 Vegas game total, one of the few lines that has moved a tiny bit. None of them since Tuesday have moved more than a half of a point, but this one did move from 49 to 49.5, so that's been bet up. I do think that is a wise choice, being bet up. Buffalo coming in as 3.5 point road favorites based off of this matchup that I see. I think it's very likely that they could dominate this game on offense, score more than this 26.5 points, but Rams also based on this, I think they could score more than their 23-point team implied total. So good on them to go over this 49.5, I believe. One of those rare times where, hey, the number one matchup actually looks like it should shoot out. And hopefully we see that for your fantasy teams. A lot of Buffalo and Rams players probably vying for playoff spots. So I think that's a good matchup for them. All right, we got an interesting one here for the number 2 game on the slate. It's Vegas actually heading into Tampa Bay, and that's the number 2 game on the slate at 46.5 for their team implied total. That 6.5 line gives Tampa Bay a 26.25 team implied total. That is actually tied for second with the previous Buffalo Bills game at number 2 on this main slate. And then Vegas at 20 for their team implied total, 15th out of the 22 teams. Getting into that Vegas side, they're red across the board on offense. Seen a little bit of an improvement, perhaps last game with Aiden O'Connell there and getting a bunch of pass yards, but 25 in the pass protection versus Tampa Bay's pass rush. I'd expect them to be under a little bit of duress and need to get the ball out a little bit quicker. That's going to lead to dump-offs, but that's going to be Brock Bowers' territory and Jacoby Myers' territory, who work underneath. So kind of plays into their strength. I expect that to continue. The DVOA aspect a little bit closer here. Tampa Bay, one of the worst teams in terms of per snap or per play, per pass play EPA. So I'd expect Vegas to actually be pretty successful when they do pass, despite needing to get out a little bit quicker. They got some studs there underneath. Just plays right into their hand. They are 6.5 point underdogs, which means they're probably going to be passing more often. I don't know if it's going to be sneaky, but the pass game here for Vegas should actually be pretty successful. The pressure shouldn't bother them as much because they got guys that can get open there underneath, and that's kind of how they move the ball. And then in terms of the run side, Vegas 31-31, Tampa Bay 12-10. I wouldn't expect the run game to be effective at all in this, and it hasn't been all season, which is just going to force more pass plays to that Vegas pass game. And Aiden O'Connell and Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers may see 60 to 70 FanDuel, 60 to 70 DraftKings points combined in this particular matchup. Looking pretty interesting for them. And then in terms of Tampa Bay, they're 16 in pass protection, Vegas 25. And then the pass DVOA, we have Tampa Bay number 8, and then Vegas 25. So Tampa Bay should have a little bit more time than they're perhaps used to throw the ball in this. That's good for Mike Evans, obviously. And then this pass DVOA, it's a red-green matchup in the favor of the offense. So Tampa Bay's offense passing the ball should be very explosive. Also good for Mike Evans there. We might see Cade Otton get a little bit more involved in this matchup as well. And then we've seen Sterling Shepard actually get quite a bit of underneath volume. That may continue, but look for that pass game to be pretty explosive. And then the run game, it's actually pretty even here in terms of the run blocking. So Vegas number 6, Tampa Bay number 6. And if you remember about the run blocking, it's basically how good are you at not getting negative yards or gaining 0 to 5 or 5 to 10 or 10 plus. So it's kind of broken down into those categories. Both of them very good in that sense. So Vegas probably stopping a lot of people behind the line of scrimmage. Tampa Bay pretty good at not getting stopped behind the line of scrimmage this season. But the DVOA tells a different story. So in those situations, how are you compared to the average outcome, especially when you take into consideration the offense or defense that you're facing? Vegas actually 22nd, just shy of being a red matchup here for them. And then Tampa Bay number 7 in the run DVOA. So Tampa Bay should also be pretty successful in terms of running the ball. Just in terms of an average outcome, let's say it's 2nd down and 2 to go. Average play is 4 rush yards on that particular play. You might see Tampa Bay rip off a 6 or a 7 yarder just because of this matchup being the way it is. So Tampa Bay looks like they're going to be able to put up a bunch of points. Pass game probably a little bit better of the two matchups compared to the run game. I think the run game is going to be popular. But yeah, any of the main goes for Tampa Bay. We should see Baker maybe be pretty successful. We should see Bucky Irving, maybe Rashad White, maybe Sean Tucker, depending on how this game script plays out. But I think Tampa Bay is going to be able to put up a lot of points. They do play a little bit slower. And then Vegas, actually, that pass game should be heavily involved here. Their neutral situation is also pretty slow, but usually their overall pace of play is pretty quick. So they usually are trailing. So even their trailing pace of play, so their offense when they're trailing by 7+ is top 6 in the league. Obviously, a lot of people play quicker when they're trailing by 7+, and they're the 6th highest in terms of that. So they're trailing a bunch. If you look down here, game time trailing rank, they are 2nd to the last. It's not what you want. So they are very poor in that regards, which is why their overall pace of play is super high. So a little bit interesting here. I think both offenses should be able to move the ball. The Raiders through the air, and the other Pirates should be good both air and ground. We got another lopsided game here for the number 3 game on the slate. Carolina heading into Philadelphia as 13.5-point underdogs. Vegas game total here 46 points, so that gives Philadelphia 29.75 team implied total. That is the number 1 on the slate. That's by over 3 points, I believe. And then Carolina at 16.25 is the worst team on the slate at 22 points. So the first and the worst on this particular matchup. So getting into the Carolina side, they're number 5 in offensive pass protection, so not taking a ton of sacks. And then Philadelphia really ramping up. They were pretty poor in general to start the season. They've just been cranking this last 6-7 weeks. They are now number 2 in defensive pass rush, number 4 in the pass DVOA. So I'd expect them to be able to get a little bit of pressure on Carolina, more than they're used to, which is going to mean they need to get the ball out a little bit quicker. Should see a lot of dump offs to the tight end, to the running backs, and to Adam Thielen in this particular matchup. The problem is that pass DVOA number 4 versus their offense at 31. They will not be very explosive. I think this is a game where, unfortunately, we probably see Bryce Young, who's looked better, look a lot worse in this particular matchup. Not explosive. Going to have to get the ball out quick under pressure. Probably one of those where we see him, maybe in the 170-yard passing for a ceiling in this particular matchup. Now, the run game a little bit different in terms of the offensive run blocking. Carolina number 4, Philadelphia middle of the pack at 15. The run DVOA, though, when you're taking into comparison the average across the NFL, Carolina 20th, Philadelphia number 5, and probably improving in that regard. I probably tend to favor this DVOA a little bit more in terms of how that run game's going to turn out. But yeah, these ones are a little bit weird when they're flip-flopped. Just pay attention to that. We probably have more of a split backfield here with Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks, unfortunately. So I don't think either of them is a very good play this week. I'm probably fading this entire Carolina team. And unfortunately, if you got some buys and you have to rely on Bryce Young, it looks like it came at a very bad time. Philadelphia, number 30 in offensive pass protection, so taking sacks. Fortunately for them, Carolina, you can see right across the board on defense, but number 29 in the pass rush, so they should have more time than they're used to throw in this particular matchup, which is going to be good for their overall pass attack. And then the pass DVOA, Philadelphia middle of the pack at 16, but Carolina 29th again in the pass DVOA here, so big favor for Philadelphia. They should have time to throw. They should be pretty explosive when they do throw the ball. That's going to be good. It sounds like Goddard probably not going to play this week as far as I could tell as of Friday evening. So that's going to lead to more A.J. Brown targets. Devonta Smith, I think, practiced in full on Thursday, so he should be back as well. So I expect this pass game to be pretty solid. Grant Calcaterra is the backup there for Goddard and did see a healthy, I think, 17 or so target share while he was in there in Goddard's stead while he was injured. So he could also get some run here and be pretty explosive. The run game, though, looks like the better of the two matchups for Philadelphia here. They're number 15 in run blocking. Carolina dead last at 32. So middle of the pack versus dead last. And then that run DVOA, number 3 for Philadelphia versus Carolina 31st. Huge favor here for Philadelphia. Philadelphia's, 13.5-point favorites. They should absolutely dominate. The pass game should have time, be explosive. The run game should be even better than that. I'd expect a lot of scoring opportunities here for Philadelphia. 30 points might seem a little low. I don't know what the weather is going to be like, but I might be okay betting the over on Philadelphia. Wouldn't be shocked to see them put up 40-plus points in this particular matchup based off of this matchup on paper. A lot of it probably coming on the ground. Kenny Gainwell may even get involved to close out like the last quarter and a half. As Carolina really struggles moving the ball. Philadelphia has no problems, especially if they're getting turnovers. This is going to turn into a very run-heavy game for Philadelphia, and you could see Gainwell be a surprise in this particular matchup. All right, 4th best game total on the slate here. Perhaps a little bit of a surprise that it wasn't higher ranked here, but Atlanta heading into Minnesota. Kirk Cousins' revenge game here, but it's a 45.5 Vegas game total, 4th best, as I had mentioned. Minnesota's 6-point favorites in this. That gives them a 25.75 team implied total, which is 4th best on the slate. Atlanta sitting just below 20 at 19.75 for their team implied total. That's good for 16th out of the 22 teams. Getting into that Atlanta side, they're number 11 in pass protection, number 13 in pass DVOA. Minnesota number 9 in the pass rush category. So they're generating sacks, getting some decent amount of pressure, but This is a pretty even matchup. If you want to say Atlanta might be in a little bit more duress than they're used to, you could say that, but it's an otherwise pretty even matchup there for Kirk Cousins. The pass DVOA, though, number 2, Atlanta 13. The issue here could be that Kirk Cousins does understand this Brian Flores defense. He had to play against it, I believe, in practice last year. I can't remember how long Flores has been there. It might be three years now that he's been there. So he could have 2 years of experience playing against Brian Flores' defense and day in and day out and seeing what that means. So he might be able to dissect this offense a little bit or defense a little bit more, which could be good. But on paper, it's not looking great for Atlanta here. They should struggle a little bit moving the ball via the air. Kyle Pitts is an avoid. He's got some terrible, terrible games in the last month. I don't think he's crested like 30 receiving yards or even like 3 fantasy points in the last month. It's kind of crazy. But of this, they're not going to be super great. It's probably Drake London, Mooney would be your best options. I know Minnesota gives up a lot of fantasy points to the wide receivers. Those would be the 2 that I'd be looking at in this particular matchup, despite, on paper it looking like they're going to struggle. Now in the run game, Atlanta number 16, so middle of the pack. Minnesota number 9, top 10 there in the defensive run stopping. Slight favor there for Minnesota's defense. And then the run DVOA, Atlanta number 10, but Minnesota number 1 in stopping the run. They've been really good at that all season. Probably continues here against Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, which unfortunately for Atlanta doesn't look very good on paper for them moving the ball at all in scoring points in this. So you can see why that Vegas line is -6, but with Kirk Cousins, perhaps knowing the defense, maybe he can pull them out of that, but certainly not looking good on paper. And then on the Minnesota side, we have them number 26 in offensive pass protection. They're taking quite a bit of sacks, but Atlanta 32 in the pass rush, just not getting home very often, or if they are, it's when you'd expect it. So Minnesota should have a lot more time than they're used to throw the ball in this, which is good for Sam Darnold. The pass DVOA is also in their favor. They're top 10 at number 10. Atlanta's defense is red there at 23. So that's a big favor for Minnesota. They should be very explosive. They should have a lot more time than they're used to throw the ball in this particular matchup. It's going to be very good for Justin Jefferson. Should be good for Addison here. We may even see, Naylor get involved in a matchup like this. Hawkinson should be all right as well. The run game, a little bit more even, but still this run blocking, Minnesota number 9, Atlanta 20th. It's a bigger favor here for Minnesota's run offense, and then the run DVOA slightly in the favor of Atlanta, but pretty close. So number 17 for run DVOA and defense for Atlanta, 17 versus 21 for Minnesota. So I expect Minnesota to lean heavily on that pass game. I wouldn't be shocked to see Minnesota score 4 touchdowns and all 4 of them come through the air in Sam Darnold. So I think he's actually a pretty good play in tournaments. I don't know how expensive he is, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him with a 3 or 4 touchdown game in this. I don't know. He's probably got a 1.5 prop bet. If he's got a 2.5 one and it's super high payout, I wouldn't mind hitting that. Just saying, hey, I think he's going to get 3 scores here through the air. I think that's a very realistic possibility in this one. All right, and then we got 2 games tied for 5th best on the slate at 44.5. Early one here first, the Jets heading into Miami. Miami is 6-point home favorites. That gives them a 25.25 team implied total, good for 5th best on the slate. The Jets, meanwhile, at 19.25 are the 18th best out of 22. Now, on the Jets side, on pass protection, number 10, they're not taking a lot of sacks. Miami, number 28 in the pass rush, not generating a lot of sacks. On paper, this tells me the Jets should have time to throw. And then the pass DVOA, number 22 for the Jets, 18 for Miami. Slightly in the favor of Miami, but more of a studs eat scenario. Jets do have 2 studs there in the wide receiver room in Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. So I think they could be pretty successful in this particular matchup, having time to throw. Maybe we see Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams have a blow-up spot here. So it's looking pretty good there. In terms of the run game, Jets haven't been good in that category all season, but they're number 22 in run blocking. Miami number 14. That's pretty heavily in the favor of Miami's defense there. And then the run DVOA, though, Jets 27th, Miami 25th. So the Jets might find it a little bit easier to move the ball in the ground than they otherwise have been used to so far this season. And we do have Breece Hall doubtful going into, Saturday, I guess, but he is doubtful to play. So Braylon Allen looking like a pretty fine play here, especially if the Jets can move the ball through the air. His matchup there in the run game doesn't seem too bad either, and we could see him with a pretty solid run. If he does get the totes, we might see him pretty successful, and then maybe they lean on him a little bit more. But yeah, an interesting one here. Jets may surprise some people in terms of how good they look on offense this week. Just pay attention to any of that Miami weather. It should be good, but you never know. On the Miami side, they're number 20 in offensive pass protection. Jets actually number 4 in that pass rush category, so they should be able to generate some pressure on Miami. Now, this used to be a lot worse when Skylar Thompson was in there. Now this is getting slowly better as Tua gets more and more games in there. That number slightly improves, so probably not as bad as it looks here. Tua gets the ball out pretty quick, but they might be under a little bit of duress, and he might need to get that ball out a little bit quicker. Fortunately, they got Tyreek Hill, Jonnu Smith, Jalen Waddle, all very capable of getting open very quick. They also utilize the running backs quite often. Devon Achane should also perhaps see a few more targets in this if they're trying to get the ball out a little bit quicker. In terms of the pass DVOA, Miami 21st. They are improving in that number, like I said. And then the Jets 16th. So this is probably a little bit closer to even than it is on paper here. But it's not telling me that Miami is going to be particularly explosive, but more of a studs eat maybe scenario, which will favor Tyreek Hill more than anybody else. In the run blocking categories, Jets have been pretty poor in that all season. Miami actually in the red here. They've also been weirdly poor in the run game this season, but number 27 versus 22, slightly in the favor of the Jets here, but Miami might find it otherwise more easy to run the ball than they've been so far this season. And then the run DVOA, Miami 28, the Jets 23. That's a red matchup, but again, that kind of tells me Miami might be a little bit better at stopping, or Miami might be a little bit better at running the ball in this particular matchup. And, kind of an interesting one here. The Jets look like they're going to be otherwise maybe a little bit better than we'd expect. Miami maybe not as great. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give you the purge siren there for the upset alert. This Vegas 6 line, I would be okay betting the Jets to cover this. If not to win outright, especially with that -6 line, you're probably going to get some good juice on that. Could be an interesting one there for the Jets heading into Miami. Wouldn't be shocked to see an upset there, so watch out for that. If you're still got survivor pools going on and this is the Miami game that you're picking, beware. All right, the other game that was number 5 on the slate was in the late window here. Seattle heading into Arizona. It's a 44.5 Vegas game total, and again, 5th best on the slate. So Arizona comes in at 2.5-point home favorites over Seattle. That gives them a 23.5 team implied total, which is 8th best on the slate. Seattle at 21 for their team implied total is 13th best. Getting into that Seattle side, they're number 24 in pass protection. Arizona 11th in that pass rush. They've been improving in that category recently, so I'd expect Seattle to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker. That's probably going to favor more of Jackson Smith and Jigba, and perhaps a little more dump-offs to the running backs. You might see Walker and Charbonnet get a little bit more involved there, and I think Fant should be back this week. Don't be surprised if you see him, earn 5 to 7 targets in this, trying to get the ball out a little bit quicker against this Arizona defense. Pass DVOA pretty even, 17 to 13. One of those scenarios where the studs eat, maybe slightly in the favor of Arizona, but With needing to get the ball out a little bit quicker the way JSN has been playing, I think this probably favors him the most out of anybody in the pass game. Metcalf, I'd be a little bit more interested in fading, even though it's a studs eat. I think the fact that they need to get the ball out quick is probably not good for him this week. But he certainly does have the talent to overcome that. Just beware. It's probably not in his wheelhouse. And I think Seattle over the last month or so has actually taken a huge dive in terms of the amount that they're passing. And if that's the case, it's even more reason not to play Metcalf in this. Seattle, in terms of run blocking, 29th and 25th, they have not been very good in that regards. Arizona, 17 and 11 on defense. So pretty big favor there for Arizona in terms of stopping the run. This to me tells me that Seattle's probably going to struggle in that regard. And it already looks like the pass game, isn't great, but it's the better of the two matchups. So not really interested in some of these Seattle players. I don't think they're going to be very good on offense. You should probably see them struggle a little bit in this one. All right, and then getting into the Arizona side, we have their number 8 in offensive pass protection, Seattle number 12. That's pretty even there. Pretty standard day at the office probably for Arizona and Seattle here. And then the pass DVOA, Arizona actually number 6 there. They've been pretty healthy against the league averages, and especially when you account for defenses. I know they've been playing, oddly, they haven't even played a single defense inside the top half yet in terms of, I don't know if it's pass DVOA, but it's some passing metric that's similar to pass DVOA. They have not faced anyone. They've all been, bottom half matchups for Arizona. So they're going against the hardest of the hard defenses so far this season. But yeah, so they're number 6 in pass DVOA, Seattle number 11, slightly here in the favor of Arizona. So maybe a little bit of explosiveness in their pass game this week. But yeah, standard day at the office, and maybe a little bit more juice to their past life here. Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously the biggest explosive player on their team, but an otherwise relatively disappointing rookie season. But McBride gets involved a bunch, and could see him again with this standard day at the office have another big week here against Seattle. And then the run blocking, we have a pretty big matchup here. Seattle number 27 in stopping the run, Arizona number 14 in offensive run blocking. So it should be pretty good in terms of moving the ball forward on every play. Then that run DVOA, Seattle 13, Arizona 13. That's pretty even up. Those are the studs eat scenarios. If you want to consider James Conner a stud, I think he's on that borderline, but he may have an all right game here. But it's basically saying he should gain positive yardage, maybe not getting too crazy in the explosive category with the DVOAs being very similar. But yeah, it looks like overall Arizona should be a little bit better on offense. Seattle maybe struggles a little bit on offense. I think Arizona covers this 2.5. If you're a betting person, I would say Arizona wins by more than 2 points in this particular matchup. All right, and then number 7 game on the slate, Chicago heading into the injury-prone San Francisco 49ers, apparently. So this is a 44 Vegas game total, 7th best on the slate. San Francisco's got a 3.5-point home favorite over the Chicago Bears here, giving them a 23.75 team implied total. That's 7th best on the main slate. Chicago 20.25 is the 14th best. Again, that's out of 22 teams. Chicago's offense almost right across the board here, but number 32 in pass protection, taking lots of sacks. San Francisco middle of the pack at 15. They should be able to generate some pressure against this Chicago Bears line, according to this. And then their pass DVOA has been very good. Number 6, Chicago 25th. I'd expect this pass game not to be very functional in here. Probably going to be under a little bit of duress and just not be very good in general, despite them being a little bit better than normal recently. This is not looking good. And it could be one of those where they didn't look good in the first half and then they come out and do a little bit better in the second half. But probably not going to be looking good at the pass game for Chicago this week. Run game, perhaps a little bit better of a matchup. They're 28th in run blocking, San Francisco 19th. That is in the favor of San Francisco in terms of probably not giving up a lot of 5 to 10 yard runs in this, but then the run DVOA slightly in the favor of Chicago, number 19, San Francisco 14. Maybe these kind of cancel each other out, but that ends up being Chicago. Their best matchup here is just the run game. DeAndre Swift may be the only player from Chicago that you're interested in having in any starting lineups this week. San Francisco, number 14 in pass protection. Chicago 16, pretty even matchup here. Nothing to write home about. I guess standard day at the office for Brock Purdy. The pass DVOA, though, for San Francisco, number 7, really good. Chicago, number 10 in the pass DVOA, but they've been slipping here as of late in terms of their pass defense. They've been not as strong as they had been previously, but San Francisco looks like they should be able to take advantage maybe of the Chicago thing, but this really looks like a studs eat scenario. I don't know, Deebo Samuel, Juwan Jennings, Kittle is probably the biggest beneficiary if it's a standard day at the office, and studs eat. It's probably going to be a Kittle week here for the San Francisco pass game. And that run game looks like it should absolutely dominate number 5 and number 9. So 2 top 10 performances there against the defense at number 29 and 30th. So red green matchups in the run game. Isaac Guerendo in a very good smash spot here to perform well. And we kind of saw that with the Jets game. We should see Braylon Allen actually in a decent spot. We should see Guerendo in a decent spot. These two are going to be extremely popular in DFS. If I was going to play one versus the other, I'd be a lot more comfortable playing Guerendo here against Chicago. They've been otherwise really bad against the run versus Braylon Allen in that game. But looking very, very good for Guerendo. Bag holders there if you need them for a last desperation play to get into the playoffs in your dynasty leagues or in your redraft leagues. He should perform excellent this week. All right, and then the 8th best game total on the slate. We have Cleveland heading into Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh 6.5-point home favorites on a 43.5 Vegas game total. That gives Pittsburgh a 25 team implied total, 6th best on the slate. And then Cleveland at 18.5 for their team implied total, at 19th best out of the 22 teams. Getting into the Cleveland offensive side, they're red across the board. Keep in mind that included a lot of Deshaun Watson being really, really bad. And now we have Jameis Winston lifting the offense pretty highly, but also lots of turnovers. So that's also a problem. Anyway, right across the board, pass protection-wise, they're number 29, Pittsburgh 19. That does look like the best of all of the matchups here on Cleveland's offensive side, and it's still a -10 on their end. They're probably going to be under a little bit of pressure, but maybe they have a little bit more time than they're used to. The DVOA, though, dead last for Cleveland at 32. Pittsburgh, number 8 in the pass DVOA. We've seen Jameis overcome this, especially against the Denver defense. Does he continue the same against this Pittsburgh defense? I'm not sure. They did play in the snow game just a few weeks ago where he had some pretty funny quotes, and Cleveland actually ended up beating Pittsburgh, but who knows? This one's in Pittsburgh. There's probably not going to be snow there. Probably going to be a different story this week. And then that run game looking very poor. Cleveland 30th and 30th. Pittsburgh number 7 and 14 in stopping the run. Ford has been getting a lot of the work. Chubb also getting mixed in quite a bit. Wouldn't start either of them in any sort of fashion. Now on the Pittsburgh side, they're 21st in pass protection. Cleveland number 7 in the pass rush. They're going to need to get the ball out a little bit quicker, which is going to be good for Pat Freiermuth and probably Najee Harris in the running backs. George Pickens, not necessarily super good at the underneath routes. I don't know if he gets involved a ton in there, but they do give him some opportunities for like slants and stuff to pick up yak yardage. He did pick up a hamstring injury, though, on the Friday practice report. Just monitor that. He may be limited or out come Sunday, and if that's the case, Pat Freiermuth looks really, really good for a tight end play in this particular matchup. The pass DVOA, though, if George Pickens does play, he's probably going to be pretty solid. when he does get the ball thrown his way. It's number 14 versus number 27. I'd expect Pickens to have a pretty solid week if he does that. Otherwise, yeah, I think they're going to have a lot more underneath pass attempts just to get the ball out a little bit quicker of Russ's hands. Russ could see himself with 5 or 6 rush attempts in this as well, as he's scrambling to get away from some of that pressure. In terms of the run game, Pittsburgh number 17 in run blocking, number 18 in run DVOA, so slightly below average. Cleveland number 1 in defensive run stopping, but number 18 in the run DVOA. So kind of an interesting one there, probably slightly in the favor of Cleveland here, despite the even DVOA. They may be able to get some, stops behind the line with Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, things like that. But yeah, so kind of an interesting one here. The pass game does look a little bit better here for Pittsburgh. Cleveland doesn't look like they're going to be able to move the ball very well. Pittsburgh also not super great here. Kind of an interesting one, 43.5 for the Vegas game total. I wouldn't be too shocked, actually, if it doesn't even reach that mark. I do have a Kyler Murray versus Russell Wilson start-sit decision, and I'm a little bit nervous now after this that maybe I should go with Kyler instead of Russell Wilson. But yeah, kind of an interesting one here. I don't mind the under on this particular matchup. Just not looking super great, not floating my boat. All right, and the 9th best game total on the main slate here is that Sunday night football game. So keep in mind, this is island game type stuff. Vegas game total is 43 points. When it's that low, I start looking at kickers. I start looking at defense, or at least one of them in that particular range. Once it starts getting below 40, I start looking at maybe multiples. But yeah, so not a super great game total here. Kansas City are 4-point home favorites over Vegas, over the Los Angeles Chargers. And that gives them a 23.5 team implied total there for Kansas City. That's tied for 8th best on the slate. And then the Chargers at 19.5 are the 17th best on the slate out of 22. On the Chargers side, their pass protection number 28, Kansas City 22nd. Slightly there in the favor of Kansas City's defense, but maybe the Chargers say, hey, I have a little bit more time than I'm used to throw the ball in this particular matchup. So that remains to be seen, but maybe just a little bit more time to throw the ball in this. The pass DVOA for the Chargers, number 12, Kansas City, number 19. So that's in the favor of the Chargers there slightly, +7. So, Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston may end up being the people that you want. We do, I think last week I said something about Josh Palmer being good, and it just ended up being a super dud game. But this one, I think, you might see him get involved as well. The run game, not looking so hot there. The Chargers 26th in run blocking, 17th in run DVOA. Kansas City number 10 and number 8 in the run stopping category. So I wouldn't expect the Chargers to be very good running the ball. They're going to have to pass the ball in order to move it. You can probably avoid any of the Chargers running backs there, even Kamani Badal, in this particular matchup. Kansas City on offense, number 19 in pass protection. The Chargers very good at number 6. Expect them to be able to get a decent pass rush on Mr. Mahomes. And then the pass DVOA, Chargers number 5, Kansas City number 15. That's telling me that offense is going to really struggle. They're going to have to get the ball out quick. It's probably going to be a lot of pass plays to Noah Gray and Taylor Swift's boyfriend over there, Travis Kelce. I think they're going to get a lot of run in this. DeAndre Hopkins also, I think, has a lower ADOT. You might see him with a okay game. Juju Smith-Schuster actually probably getting involved there in some of these quicker throws as well. Kareem Hunt, possibility that he gets involved in this if they're trying to get the ball out a little bit quicker. But this pass game just doesn't look very good under pressure, and they're probably not going to be very explosive in this. The run game, a little bit different story. Kansas City number 8 in run blocking. Chargers number 25 in stopping the run. That's a number 8 versus number 25. Red green matchup. We do like to attack those. However, the run DVOA, a little bit closer. Kansas City 11, Chargers 15. If the Chiefs are going to move the ball, it's going to be on the ground. They're probably going to be struggling through the air, with the Chargers being a little bit maybe better than usual through the air. I think this game is going to end up being pretty close. Chargers, I think they can cover that 4-point line. I might just go ahead and say Another upset alert here. I think the Chargers could pull this one out against Kansas City, especially if they're struggling through the air. That run game is like their only saving grace there. And the Chargers, for whatever reason, seem to be able to pass the ball pretty effectively. And that could be to Kansas City's detriment here. And, you know, they have gotten really, really lucky, if you ask me, in terms of how they have won some of these games. I think maybe some of that luck runs out here on Sunday Night Football. But if you're doing an island game matchup, Kansas City run game, it might be more Kareem Hunt that I'm looking at, especially with the pass game needing to get the ball out a little bit quicker. Noah Gray is somebody that you could look at getting involved too. He's going to be a cheaper option than getting some of the Chargers pass game and avoiding that run game. So Will Dissly, if you think they're going to be under pressure, is also an option. But, you know, Justin Herbert, Ladd McConkey, maybe getting Noah Gray and double tight end there with Kelsey. Could be an interesting build, but something like that. I think it's going to be a pretty even game, but the Chargers may pull this one out. And just with the way the Chargers may be moving the ball through the air but not in the ground, you might be able to see them kick some field goals. So Cameron Dicker also probably an option in your DFS lineups for the island games. All right, just 2 games left here on the main slate. I got an early game here. The Saints heading into New York as 5-point road favorites, actually. That's a 41 Vegas game total, so pretty gross there. With that Vegas line, that gives New Orleans a 23 team implied total. That is good for 10th best on the slate. And then the Giants at 18 for their team implied total is second to the worst at number 21 out of the 22 teams. On the Saints side, offensive pass protection number 13. The Giants actually very good in the defensive pass rush category, number 1. On paper, this looks very good, but the Giants did just lose Dexter Lawrence. I think that's going to hurt that number a little bit, but otherwise, New Orleans probably going to need to get the ball out quick. It's going to lead to dump-offs more for the running backs and the tight ends, and that's Kamara, and that's probably, now that Taysom Hill's out of the picture, we're going to see Foster Moreau and Johnson get a little bit more involved here for New Orleans. MVS is more of the deep threat, so based off of this on paper, not looking as great, but if Dexter Lawrence was a big part of that, then maybe MVS gets involved as well, because that pass DVOA is in the favor of New Orleans, not by much, but number 24 for New Orleans are red, but the Giants really bad in that category, 28th. So not looking great for the Giants defense in the pass game this year. The Saints on offense for running the ball are number 11 and run blocking. The Giants 16th. That's a +5 for New Orleans on the offense. And then the run DVOA 8th. The Giants 20th. That's a bigger favor here for the Saints pass game, I think, or excuse me, Saints run game. So in general, I think Saints going to be pretty effective passing the ball. They're just going to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker. Fortunately, that's kind of how their offense is built. And then the run game should be pretty effective. Not super stellar, but it should be pretty effective here. So don't be shocked if Kamara has a pretty solid week here, catching some passes and being pretty effective out of the backfield, running the ball as well. Now for the Giants, they're 22nd in offensive pass protection. The Saints 23rd in the pass rush category. That's an otherwise standard day at the office. Maybe there's a little bit more time to throw the ball than the Giants have been used to this year. Unfortunately, their pass DVOA number 30. Saints actually pretty good at number 14, a little bit above average versus one of the worst. Wouldn't expect the Giants to be very good in the pass game here. If there's anybody who could do well, I don't even know. Wan'Dale Robinson and Neighbors are your best bet. We have Theo Johnson on IR, so there's no other weapons in there besides Tyrone Tracy. And looking at that, that's a very good matchup. That's probably how New York is going to have to move the ball. So they're number 19 in that category versus the Saints 31st. And then the Giants 15 in run DVOA, Saints dead last at 32. So Tyrone Tracy looks like the one from this game that you're going to want. Tracy and Kamara probably your best bets for any sort of offensive production in this particular matchup. So running backs and probably the running backs only based off of this. But yeah, if you're looking to get in the playoffs, I think Tyrone Tracy actually a pretty solid matchup here. And final game on the main slate, we have two AFC South teams. that are not very good. Jacksonville heading into Tennessee. That's a 40 on the Vegas game total. That is, again, the worst out of 11 games. That gives a Tennessee team implied total of 21.75, means they have a 3.5 home favorite line there for Vegas, and that is good for the 12th best team implied total on the slate. Jacksonville at 18.25 is the 20th best on the main slate. Again, Tennessee there, 3.5 point home favorites. Jacksonville, number 6 in offensive pass protection, so not taking a ton of sacks. Tennessee slowly getting worse in that regard, but middle of the pack at number 14. Pass DVOAs are a little bit closer, so Jacksonville 18, Tennessee's defense 17. That's kind of a studs eat scenario. If Jacksonville's going to have time to throw against Tennessee and it's a studs eat scenario, I think this is one where we see Brian Thomas Jr. actually have a pretty solid game here against Tennessee. Wouldn't be shocked if he ends up, well over 100 yards and having a touchdown in this particular matchup against Tennessee. It's looking pretty good. The run game is where Tennessee's defense has been very good this season, though. They're number 3 in stopping the run, number 9 in run DVOA. Jacksonville, middle of the pack there, if not a little bit below average in running the ball, 18th and 16th. Wouldn't expect them to be very good running the ball. That's going to be the air game that moves their offense on this particular Sunday morning or Sunday noontime, depending on where you're at. But along with that, if you have leagues with kickers, I think Jacksonville's kicker is viable here. But if Jacksonville is getting, moving the ball, it might be these big pass plays via Brian Thomas Jr., where he's actually scoring and not giving you field goal opportunities. But if they do move the ball, I think that run game matchup is bad enough that they're going to stall out, maybe kick some field goals in this matchup. On the Tennessee side, it's pretty evenly matched here. 31st in pass protection for Tennessee, 29th in pass DVOA, so taking a lot of sacks and not being very effective in the pass DVOA. Fortunately for them, Jacksonville basically the worst team in the NFL in these categories. 31st in the pass rush, so Tennessee should otherwise have a lot more time than they're used to throw the ball in this particular matchup. And then the pass DVOA, Jacksonville number 32. This is looking good for Will Levis in his matchup. He should be pretty good. He should be otherwise more explosive than you're used to. We could see Calvin Ridley, Nick Westbrook-Akine be very good in this particular matchup. Don't be shy to put them into your lineups in deeper leagues and even potentially play them in DFS, especially if Jacksonville is going to be successful with those big plays with Brian Thomas Jr. Have an interesting one there. And then on the run side, Tennessee 23rd and 23rd running the ball, so just in that red category. Fortunately for them, Jacksonville's defense hasn't been very good in that regard either. They're 23rd in stopping the run and then 16th in run DVOA, so maybe a slight favor there for Jacksonville's defense. But Tennessee should be able to move the ball a little bit better than they otherwise have been all season. Don't be shocked if Jacksonville strikes, with some pretty long touchdown strikes there with Brian Thomas Jr., but could be an interesting one. I'm going to be honest, I wish that run game was a little bit better for Jacksonville, but I don't mind actually betting the over on this Vegas game total between Jacksonville and Tennessee if that weather isn't an issue. I think Tennessee can put up some points. I think Jacksonville can strike quick and get some long bombs there with Brian Thomas Jr. So I wouldn't be shocked to see this one hit over 40 points. I think that Vegas line of 3.5 points is probably pretty solid in terms of what I'm seeing here. But an interesting one there for the worst game on the slate. I think there are some pieces that may perform very well in that game. All right, so battle of the Mike Zimmer, I guess. So we have Monday Night Football, Cincinnati heading into Dallas. I believe Mike Zimmer was defensive coordinator for both of these teams. I think he was defensive coordinator for Cincinnati before coming to the Vikings, if I remember correctly. He is now a defensive coordinator in Dallas. So we have a 49.5 Vegas game total here on Monday Night Football. When it's that high, I start thinking all of the offensive players are probably in play here for the top 6 or the most optimal lineup that you can make in the particular DFS salary cap. So 49.5 points, 5.5 point road favorites here for Cincinnati heading into Dallas to play on Monday night. That gives Cincinnati 27.5 for their team implied total, Dallas 22. On the Cincinnati side, 17 in pass protection, Dallas getting better in that pass rush category at number 8. Probably going to be able to generate a little bit of pressure here against Cincinnati, which is going to force them to get the ball out a little bit quicker. We could see Mike Gesicki get more involved, Chase Brown get a little bit more involved. And then if you're going to get more of the underneath stuff, it's probably going to be more Jamar Chase than T. Higgins. But yeah, I think those are the biggest beneficiaries that I can see from the Cincinnati side, just needing to get the ball out a little bit quicker. And when they do that, they should be pretty explosive. Dallas has otherwise been pretty bad. Cincinnati's actually 5th in pass DVOA, Dallas 21st. So heavily favored there for Cincinnati's pass attack. They're going to have to get the ball out quick, but they should be very good when they do get the ball in that regard. So Chase, I wouldn't be shocked to see a big game out of him. Gesicki and Brown should also be explosive when they're catching those balls. And then the run game, actually pretty good here for Cincinnati. They're a below average run team here, 21st in run blocking and 24th in run DVOA. But fortunately for them, Dallas, one of the worst run defenses. I think this is improving since we've had some players come back, but 30th and 29th on paper, a favor here for Cincinnati's run game. So Chase Brown maybe getting involved in the pass game. We should see a pretty effective game from him on the ground. They are 5.5 point favorites, so Chase Brown, certainly an interesting one to look at in terms of perhaps your captain spot in this matchup. But the DVOA here for Cincinnati I think is a little bit better. So Burrow, Chase, I think are a little bit better options. If you want somebody cheap, I think Gesicki could get involved. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one there. And then on the Dallas side, they're 7th in offensive pass protection, so not taking a lot of sacks. In Cincinnati, not getting a lot of sacks. So 7 versus 30. It's a red-green matchup here. We should see a lot of time for Cooper Rush to throw the ball in this. And then the DVOA, Dallas 26th, Cincinnati 30th. Dallas should otherwise be pretty good in the pass game compared to what they've been throughout the season. Wouldn't be shocked to see CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cooks and company get some pretty good fantasy points out of this particular pass game matchup. And then the run game is pretty even up. That's a scenario where you say studs eat. I don't think Dallas has any studs, so it's probably just a standard day at the office for Rico Dowdle. But in general, playing a pretty poor defense, so he's probably going to be fairly effective on the ground when he does run the ball. So kind of an interesting one here. Cincinnati looks like they have all sorts of players that should do well. Dallas looks like they should do well. I do like this 49.5 Vegas game total to perhaps hit over that. I think the only way that this struggles is if Cooper Rush just has a bad game. They do play very fast. Dallas does. Cincinnati more middle of the pack, but Dallas is very quick there. And if they're otherwise a little bit more successful than they're used to, it could be a big shootout game here for the final game going into the playoffs. So Cincinnati, Dallas will be an interesting one that's deciding a lot of those playoff matchups, but it should be pretty high scoring here. Like I said, I don't hate taking the over on that in terms of who's going to win this game. I think that 5.5 Vegas line seems a little steep perhaps in terms of Cincinnati's on the road. The matchup on paper is okay, maybe slightly in the favor of them, but otherwise pretty even. So it'll be an interesting one here. I think Dallas can cover that 5.5 points. Wouldn't be shocked to see this end up being like a 30-27, 30-28 type deal where Cincinnati maybe pulls it out. But yeah, an interesting one. I think it's going to be high scoring, and it might change the outcome of some of those final fantasy football games heading into the playoff matchup. So that's going to do it for this week's episode on the Adjusted Line Play Report, Week 14. Hopefully you can take some of this information, make the correct start-sit decisions, make those correct prop bets within your, whatever fantasy platform you're playing on or whatever platform you're playing on, and you can win some money on those prop bets. And then taking this info and making some good DFS lineups too. I think there's some interesting plays for sure this week that may otherwise be pretty unpopular, including the worst game on the slate in terms of the Vegas game total. So hopefully we gave you a little bit more confidence in making some of those start-sit decisions here that could affect your playoff standings. And yeah, let's go out there, have a good week. Let's go win some money together. Peace.